And I want to send, yay, thank you, Jason, hero of the day. So just for the start of the recording, this is book club, DC-AAPOR book club 2.0, featuring Seeskin and Connie Citro talking about the nation state at risk. And I want to say a huge thank you to NORC for generously providing the space for this session. This is our first hybrid session in the series. So thank you so much to those who have come in person. It's really nice to have that interaction. We were chit-chatting and doing kind of that retro, like, water cooler talk before the session started. We love it. So for those unfamiliar with this series, or as a reminder to any regulars, the format is straightforward. First, Zach and Connie will present an overview of their report, including highlights and insights. And during their presentation, for those online, please mute your microphones and use the chat feature in Zoom to enter thoughts and questions. Then we'll open up the floor for discussion, and I'll do my best with the able assistance of Jason to go back and forth between those in the room and those online, starting with items from the chat box and then more generally. Normally, we have a drawing for a lucky DC-AAPOR member to receive a free copy of the book that we're discussing. But in this case, we're all lucky that the report is available online for anyone to download, and I'll drop that link in the chat shortly. It's now my pleasure to introduce our guests. Zachary Seeskin is a senior statistician with NORC at the University of Chicago, where he works on sample design, estimation, and data analysis for government and public interest surveys. Connie Citro is a political scientist, statistician, and independent consultant. She is the former director of the Committee on National Statistics of the National Academies of Sciences, Engineering, and Medicine, and a current member of the American Statistical Association project on assessing the health of the federal statistical agencies. We're really happy to have you here, and over to you.
Just testing, everybody can hear? Okay, great. Thank you for inviting Zach and me to talk to you about the American Statistical Association's project to assess and monitor the health of federal statistics. Okay, is that going?
Okay, let's go back. There we go.
Is it working now? All righty. Okay. This project was actually launched in 2023 to take the pulse of the nation's statistical system, which is to America's public data infrastructure what roads and bridges and tracks and so on are to transportation infrastructure. Our goals were threefold. We wanted to track capabilities, achievements, and challenges for the statistical agencies over time, to proactively monitor so that we were on top of emerging crises rather than doing ad hoc after the fact reviews, and to build an information base for everyone who cares about federal statistics to discuss priorities and the future. Our focus is on the 13 agencies, Census, BLS, BJS, et al., whose primary mission is to produce official statistics, plus the Chief Stats Office in OMB. I have a red exclamation point there because for the first time, the Chief Statistician is a political appointee who is a high-level OMB management person, and it remains to be seen how that works. Here's the project team and our funders. All right, reports. We've written 3 reports, 2 biggish ones, 1 moderate-sized one, and the one Zach and I will focus on is the one in the middle for the December 2025 report. We've also done a lot of other things, or are doing them, many of which started last year or this year, near real-time monitoring of actions affecting federal statistics. There's a newsletter, Count on Stats, you can sign up for. We're enlisting data users to tell us when data come out, are they the same data that they were used to getting? And then to have resources, vetted information. If you want to know, for instance, what is the Chief Statistician's role, you'll be able to find it. And then last listed but not least is the NORC AmeriSpeak panel, which has for now some months added questions that are under Zach's purview on the public's uses of and views on federal statistics. Okay, our first report found that already before the tsunami that hit us last year, the nation's data were at risk. The statistical agencies had weaknesses in at least one of three critical supports: their professional autonomy, their support from their parent agency, their cabinet department, and adequate budget and skilled staff. We planned a late fall 2025 report similar to 2024, maybe looking at some other aspects of the statistical system, but the tsunami hit and we switched really very promptly to what we call near real-time monitoring. And we say near real-time because we try to vet what we put up. But if you go to the website, there's a page. It's organized chronologically and then by agency and by these topics that you can read. In the summer last year, we pulled together what we had seen into a status report: reductions in the amount and availability of federal statistical data. And again, we said we were at a crossroads. The agencies need well thought out investment, and instead we're getting uncoordinated and unplanned reductions with no visible plan for the future. Our December report pulled together a lot of information, and it also concluded that we need immediate action to halt this severe decline in the agency's ability to meet their basic mission and to innovate. And we also need affirmation of the importance of credible and objective statistics. Now, we are under no illusions that this will actually happen under this administration anytime soon, but it was important to put down the markers. So we updated the findings about these three critical support areas. And first is staffing, which is just key. Staff, you have to have staff. And there are many excellent contractors working for the agencies too, but you also need a good mass of in-house staff. This is a complicated, busy chart, but you can see all these minuses, and that is declines in staffing. It's actually been very hard to find accurate comparable staffing numbers, and we're working on that right now and hope to have an update out that is comparable over time and across agencies. But the overall impact is clear. What with not hiring people who were still in their probationary period, RIFs, the buyouts et al., big losses, huge in some agencies, including in top leadership. Some agencies are going to be relocated, and that could further affect their staff. A new civil service schedule called policy/career has been through the official regulatory process and is now in effect, and agencies, we understand, are now telling OMB, here are some folks at the top of the civil service that we can reclassify because they have something to do with policy, and those people will turn into at-will employees rather than having civil service protections. Now, some hiring is happening. Census and BLS have posted some positions recently, but overall, it's pretty bad. Budgets. These figures go back to FY09, and they are FY09 dollars, in other words, inflation adjusted. The purple dots are the president's request, and the avocado, I guess it is I didn't pick the colors, but it is the Congress actual appropriations. You can see a bounce up, not as much in Congress as the president, but a bounce up after the Great Recession, when policymakers managed to figure out that there were some data that they really wished they had had before the Great Recession, and they funded some of that. But it's essentially been slowly downhill since then. Exceptions, the 2020 census and so on. The president's request for FY26 was really down, and the Congress appropriated more. The FY27 budget request that's just come out is also down. and remains to be seen what Congress will do. The second important support for stat agencies, any agency in the federal government, is from its parent agency, and in this case, the administration, because the administration has its fingers in just about everything. And parent agencies are actually, by law, supposed to support their statistical agencies to be able to do an objective, accurate, timely, you name it, job. But overall, the actions of the administration have heavily weakened and far outweigh any actions that have supported the agencies, and you can read the list. Here's what we call statistical integrity safeguards. That's what we used to call professional autonomy or professional independence. It turns out that politicians of both parties dislike the idea of anything in their bailiwick in the executive branch being independent. So, statistical integrity safeguards, meaning again, the statistical agencies need to be protected so they can be objective and trusted and credible. And this administration has threatened that. The most dramatic episode to date was when the BLS commissioner was fired last summer for totally specious reasons. And I would also say in my personal capacity that the scaled back plans for the 2026 test leading up to the 2030 census is definitely the administration putting its thumb on the scale in a way that they're not going to learn very much that will be helpful. All right, what are the implications of all these reductions and general dissing of the agencies? Program cancellations or scope reduction, product delays, data quality degradation if you can't afford the sample size you used to have, or with lower response. And some subject matter has just been cut out. And from the user perspective, agencies, to their credit, have been doing everything possible to keep the data coming in. They are cutting back on tables, analytic summaries, handy tools for access that really help users, but those are going over the side. And there are references here, there's the sections of the December 2025 report. We have a highly decentralized statistical system in the US, in contrast to most countries, but it is interdependent in a number of ways. And of one of which is that agencies are often the sources for data inputs to other agencies. And so there's a real risk if one agency is just being, slashed at, that something that they produce could adversely affect something in another agency. And this diagram is just showing one of these dependencies. On the right are the components of BEA's personal income, wages, Medicare, Social Security, unemployment, etc. Personal income is 70% of GDP. On the left are all the organizations that provide data that flow in. BEA doesn't do much data collection itself. It sucks in other data from other places. There are statistical agencies at the top, other federal agencies, and some private sector. The biggest suppliers to BEA for this are the Census Bureau, BLS, the SSA Office, Research Evaluation Statistics, Statistics of Income, and the Economic Research Service in agriculture by the size of those blue boxes and the flows. And there have been some glitches in, for instance, getting the statistics of income data to BEA or to Census for that matter that could be quite consequential in the future. All right, another implication is the impaired capacity for innovation. But I do want to give a shout out to the agency staff and also to folks who work for them on contracts or grants or whatever. And I was particularly blown away by the very impressive agenda and abstracts for the Federal Committee on Statistical Methodology Research Conference that was held A few weeks ago, it was just that there were no outside people, but there are a lot of really, really good work going on. But still, advisory committees have been just canceled. Getting outside experts to help the agencies on IPAs or other agreements are tougher. And so the resources, capacity, and culture for innovation are not in as good shape as they need to be, particularly again for users. The agencies do vary a lot in how good their websites are and their access tools, and it would be really lovely if they would all get up to state of the art, but there's no money or staff time for that. One promising thing is that some foundations are funding some partnerships with the stat agencies, academia, some commercial enterprises on new methods for economic statistics. And these are very promising, but they're it's just one piece of federal statistics, which includes justice and education and health and all kinds of other things. Finally, in our December 2025 report, we have a section called Congressional and Stakeholder Considerations. The big puzzle: why have the federal statistical agencies been losing purchasing power, as I showed you in that graph, starting in FY09 or FY10, when the rest of the discretionary non-defense budget had been, at least until just recently, increasing in real dollar terms? And why are there not resources for innovation, improving access, communicating more with data users? Well, I can't go into the detail here. There's a fair amount of it in the report, but it turns out some quirks in the annual appropriations process disadvantage the budgets of federal statistical agencies which are doing a public good. They tend to lose out, like injustice to, more police on the street or some such. Also, the stakeholders like AAPOR and ASA and others who are trying to help the agencies are often not working together or are fragmented and inconsistent. And the agencies are so prone to getting unfunded mandates. Oh yeah, we need everything you're doing, plus we really need this new thing, but sorry, there isn't any money. We have recommendations in this report. They are fairly generic, and again, we are under no illusions that they will be adopted anytime soon, but again, we felt it important to lay out some stakes in the ground. What about this hiring freeze? The agencies need exemptions. It takes staff, labor to produce federal statistics. AI is not there now and probably will never be to get credible statistics. Steps are needed to strengthen trust, and appropriations need to take account of the statistical agency's role, which after all is to help the federal government do its job and also the general public. And there needs to be system-wide funds for modernization. Right now, the agencies are interdependent, but they're funded totally separately. And as budget and staffing allow, there needs to be more active portfolio management and leadership development that is cross-agency instead of each agency in its own silo and its own department. Similarly, I think a big thing is enhancing data accessibility, functionality, and preservation. If the agencies can increase their user base, this is a win-win and can have positive feedback loop on appropriations, for example. For professional associations, the agencies have practically begged us to say, we don't have money or authority, like to meet with users. Associations could help them organize such sessions. Similarly, associations and other stakeholders could collaborate and coordinate more. And when you're asking for something new, always say, this should need its own funding. Don't cannibalize something else. And if you're opposing when an agency says, oh, I want to get rid of something, go ahead and make the case, but try to leave the agencies the room to make the proper methodological decisions about, is there a more efficient way, for instance, to get what you want than whatever the current mechanism was. I wanted to say just a little bit about this new page we have on our website called Additional Resources. Our reports have a lot of what we call supporting materials attached to them, but those get lost. Once you've looked at that page once, you probably forget that they're there. So we have this page where we're putting quantitative updates, America Speak updates that Zach will talk about, updates on budget, staff, leadership. We're planning a major release, given the president's budget is out, about where the agencies stand. Another part is what I call information documents. We're taking some of these supporting materials, such as the value of FedStats, the origins of the system, which is quite interesting, by the way, and updating them and making them standalone documents. We've had reporters say, I didn't even know there was a chief statistician, or I didn't know about this or that. Here will be vetted, informative information. We post podcasts, interviews, webinars that we've done, other publications, and other vetted resources. The Congressional Research Service has put out a nifty thing about the chief statistician. They do good, solid, objective work. Our plans going forward, where we're going to be continuing what we're doing, and particularly the NORC AmeriSpeak, and we're working with users about monitoring data products. We hope to do some special topics. Response rates are one, and the implications of what's been happening to the data for particular topic areas like healthcare policy. Okay, my last slide. Here are some QR codes. Here are some URLs. Tell us, get on our site. What do you like about our report? What did we get wrong? What did we get right? What should some of our priorities be? And if you can't figure out how to tell us what you'd like to, please email Steve Pearson, who is the American Statistical Association's outstanding science policy director, who just does a yeoman work with this project and a gazillion other things. And he is very responsive on email. So thank you. And over to Zach to tell you about the AmeriSpeak part, which is a unique data source that's not been previously available about what the public thinks about federal statistics, what they know about federal statistics.
Thanks so much, Connie.
You're very welcome.
So I'll just take a second to transition slides. Okay, almost there.
There you go.
Now it's synced. Okay, great. Well, thanks, Connie, and thanks so much for inviting us to be here today. So as Connie introduced, I'm going to speak about a part of the project focused on understanding federal data use and monitoring trust in federal statistics. And we'd like to start by thanking all the members of the Health of Federal Statistics project team, who are excellent to work with. And I'd also like to thank colleagues at NORC, who are in the room and have made great contributions to this project. I'm working closely with Angelo Kazubo, a data scientist at NORC, who is here. It's been great to work with, and Ting Yan has provided critical guidance, particularly with designing our questionnaire for these studies. Okay, so to understand and inform investments in federal statistics in the future, it's really important to understand data use. How are federal data used? Who are federal data users? What are their experiences with federal data? And also to understand the public's level of trust in federal statistics, and how does the U.S. public in general view different aspects of federal data. So to do this, we've been collecting nationally representative data. We've been collecting data from NORC at the University of Chicago's AmeriSpeak panel, now going back from June 2025, continuing through the present. The data that I will share today includes some analysis that was included in the December 2025 report, but now data through February 2026. In that time period, we've collected data from more than 10,000 respondents. So I'll start by talking about federal data use. And a major thing that we have learned is that uses of federal data are quite diverse, and federal data users come from a whole variety of backgrounds. Also, most federal data users don't necessarily have technical backgrounds. We're certainly reaching a lot of users who are doing research-oriented analyses, working with microdata, but the majority of data users, from the nationally representative estimates, are using reports and tables and maps, but not necessarily doing research into microdata and other confidential data. This chart is a word cloud developed by my colleague Angelo. So looks at open-ended responses we received from a subset of these data users reporting the primary ways in which they use federal data. So there's 437 different responses here. So you certainly see research well represented. We're hearing from academic users. There are people using federal data in coursework at different levels. We're also hearing a lot about the use of federal data in business planning, people using inflation and unemployment data. A lot of data users in the health space, understanding disease spread, understanding trends with COVID. There are people who are using federal data for making grant applications, curriculum development. We've heard about fact checking. So there's a whole varieties of diverse ways that we're hearing that individuals are using federal data. And federal data users are, across different professional backgrounds, industries, occupations, come from different educational backgrounds as well. So this chart focuses on federal data use by different industries. We're particularly looking here at individuals who we say report more experience using federal statistics. So the red circle series are individuals who we call them frequent data users, defined as using federal data at least quarterly. And the blue triangle series are individuals who are using microdata or some kind of confidential restricted data. And so this plots for each of these industries the percentage of all data users we're finding in those industries. So you can see that there are a few industries with more data users than others. So there's large percentages in educational services, professional, scientific, and technical services. But if you take those top 2 or 3 and add them up, they're not even close to majority of all data users. Data users are really spread across many different professional backgrounds and kinds of data uses. So I'm going to shift to the topic of the U.S. public's views of federal statistics. So we're asking all of our respondents, whether they're federal data users or not, what are their perspectives on different aspects of federal data, including tending to trust federal statistics. So that's, we have monthly estimates that are shown here, June 2025 to February 2026, the bluish triangle series. And one of the questions that we're asking is related to the relevance of federal data, the percentage agreeing or strongly agreeing that policymakers need federal statistics to make good decisions. So at this point, we've established a baseline for monitoring responses to these questions and estimates, and can look going forward as the environment evolves to see any changes in these estimates. And we've certainly noticed that there's some up and downs with tending to trust federal statistics. We tended to see a bit higher estimates last summer, with estimates in June and August of 55 to 57% reporting tending to trust federal statistics, and a bit lower in the most recent months, 49 to 51%. And we're asking the public about their perspectives on different aspects of federal data. Here we are also have series monitoring views on privacy, confidentiality, and combining data from different sources. So again, these are series we plan to ask these questions going forward and monitor any changes. I will note some of these estimates appear low. Part of this is that these questions about are agreeing or strongly agreeing with the statement. There are large percentages who are responding and say that they neither agree nor disagree with these statements. So it's not that everybody else disagrees with the statements. Just to go through, the blue square series are the estimates that people can trust federal statistical agencies to keep information about them confidential. The green triangle series, statistical agencies generally respect people's privacy, and the red circle series that the government should combine data from different agencies to inform decision making. And we're looking at how perspectives on federal data differ by individuals' background and demographic characteristics. One result that stands out are the differences in perspectives on federal statistics by educational background. The pattern here does appear for multiple questions that we're asking about federal data. So this shows the estimated percent of adults who agree or strongly agree that policymakers need federal statistics to make good decisions by month for 4 different educational groups. You can see going from the purple series, high school graduate or less, up to the red circle series, those with a professional or degree or postgraduate study. The higher the level of education, that group tends to have more positive perspectives of federal statistics. So this suggests that there is an opportunity for the federal statistical system to reach out to individuals of all educational backgrounds, think about the design of materials to reach everyone, to help communicate about the importance of federal data and gain trust in federal statistics. So I'm going to show one slide here that looks specifically at understanding data users' perspectives, and this is data we're just beginning to analyze and understand. We're focusing here on frequent data users who are more engaged using federal data. Again, the definition here is individuals who use federal data at least quarterly, and we only have a certain number of respondents on a monthly basis, but now have built up to have more responses from federal data users to analyze. We're looking at different estimates for federal data users, tending to trust federal statistics, agreeing or strongly, the percentage agreeing or strongly agreeing with different statements about federal statistics. And we're comparing 2 different groups here. Individuals who use microdata, other confidential restricted data. We've heard from 228 of these respondents, compared with individuals who are only using reports or tables or maps. We've heard from 560 such individuals at this point. First, if you look at the overall estimates, data users have high levels of trust in federal statistics, certainly compared with the overall public, tend to have positive views of federal statistics. A possible area where there's disagreement or some have concerns would be about federal statistics being available in a timely manner and federal agencies maintaining confidentiality. We're also seeing some differences between microdata users and report and table only users. The microdata users tend to have more positive views about federal statistics. It is still a bit early to dive into this data and understand the reasons, but as we're exploring and looking at different patterns among data users, one possible explanation that would be consistent is that the more familiar a data user is with federal data, for example, understands all the care that goes into protecting confidentiality, et cetera, tends to be associated with more positive views about federal statistics. So this is something we'll certainly be analyzing more going forward. And so just to summarize different things that we found, there are a wide variety of data uses. Federal data are used across different industries and occupations by individuals of different professional backgrounds, and we're finding that many federal data users do not necessarily come from technical backgrounds and are primarily using reports, tables, maps, etc. We are monitoring trends and perspectives on federal statistics, so we've now established a baseline looking at these estimates since June 2025, and we'll continue to collect and analyze this data and monitor these estimates going forward. We find that perspectives on federal statistics among the public vary by different characteristics. One characteristic that stands out is the association between educational background and more positive views about federal statistics, suggesting an opportunity to reach out to individuals of different educational backgrounds to communicate about the importance of federal data. We found that data users have high levels of trust in federal statistics. There are some data users who have concerns about aspects like timeliness and confidentiality. And we're starting to look into understanding differences among data users from different backgrounds and are finding differences in perspectives on federal data by type of data use. So we'll continue to collect and analyze this data going forward. More detailed estimates are available from the American Statistical Association's website. You can visit this link to find the data that are available to date to dive in more. And from our December 2025 Nation's Data at Risk report, we have an appendix with the analyzing the data available at that time, so you can read about more in-depth analyses there. Thank you so much, and we're looking forward to the discussion and your questions.
Thank you, Zach and Connie. I think, like I said in the chat, even if it feels like there's not much to be done right now, I think it's just really important to be monitoring this and continue to sound the alarm on the issues that we're seeing. So I really appreciate you all doing that. Let's see, last I checked, I didn't see any questions in the chat. Jason, okay. So I'm gonna open it up for questions, comments, discussion. I'm going to start online. So if you have a question, please raise your hand and feel free to turn on your camera. Start with your name and affiliation if you don't mind.
Could you show us what's, oh, you've got it here, okay.
Yeah. Do you have any questions online?
See people.
People are still absorbing. It's a lot to absorb.
Yes, there's a lot of material to absorb. And, but if you have a favorite statistical agency or subject matter, you should also look in the appendices, what we call supporting materials. There's a profile for each agency that has more depth about what they do, their budget situation, anything special that's happened, that kind of thing. So. And there's also, again, there are supporting materials about the origins of the system. Essentially, with our, the Constitution has the census. The Constitution also has that the president will report from time to time to Congress on the state of things. And the Treasury Secretary, first one, Alexander Hamilton, exploited that to the hilt. He did extensive reports on the economy, manufacturing, and of course on customs, because tariffs were the only federal revenue source at the time, and excise duties. There was the whiskey tax rebellion, etc. So from that came that cabinet, as sort of policy issues rose from the states to the federal interest. Cabinet departments were established, and they always had a statistical agency, or almost always, set up along with them. In fact, the agriculture department was set up by Lincoln during the Civil War, and there was an Department of Education whose main purpose at that time was to collect comparable statistics across the states about what was happening in public education. They did away with the department a couple of years later, but they kept that statistical office, and it wound its way through various locations. until the modern Department of Education and until last year when they cut the heart out of it, basically. But there's also an ASA project that is foundation funded to try to re-envision the National Center for Education Statistics, and has a nifty spreadsheet about what data sources are still ongoing, which ones have been totally canceled, which ones it's sort of unclear, and all that, if that happens to be your area. So again, there are a lot of different materials that are provided there. Another one on innovation, because we've been making the argument that the agencies do innovate, but when you have declining resources in real terms, there's only so much you can do. And that background document has things like, it was the statistical agencies that essentially made probability sampling into what it is today. And some of those people, of course, left and founded firms like Westat and so on, from the government. And they were also the first adopters of computer processing, and hot-deck imputation came from that, and all kinds of things. And there have been innovations going along, and during COVID that year, they really, stepped up their game with the various pulse surveys and other things. But again, very hard to do that when you have to keep the basic data series coming out, and you're getting huge staff losses and budgets that are, and contract review, or et cetera, et cetera. Yes, sir.
Hey, Connie. So two sort of related questions. So you pointed out that one of the key challenges of the last year and 2 months now has been about the staff. You just sort of referenced. Are you, with this report or the ASA writ large, going to sort of continue monitoring what's happening with the staff level at the individual agencies?
Yes.
You sort of alluded to that, but if
Yes,
you could explain
yes.
that a little bit. And as sort of a secondary thing, the staff cuts are potentially the most long-term
Yes.
damages, because these
Yes.
are decades of years of experience that are being
Yes.
lost, many of
Yes.
which are people who are basically retiring, so they
Yes.
won't be recoverable. Is the ASA or people in the space thinking about how do we develop a pool of sufficiently trained personnel to restaff these agencies if and when they're able to be reconstituted?
Yes, that is a really difficult question. First, on the monitoring, yes. And we are trying, we think we finally now have maybe a source, I don't remember the acronym, but of comparable numbers. There's the full-time, part-time, and the interviewer staff and things like that. So that is one of the most important things that we see about monitoring. In terms of trying to get a pipeline going again, it's a big topic, but I have not actually heard of actionable plans. Some folks who have retired have gone to other, like there are a bunch of, I was just talking with Linda Young, who was the chief scientist at NAS, and she's now with NIST, the National Institute, and apparently they've signed up people like John Elting and Chris Chapman, and they're hoping to get, but they're, like everybody else, they actually need some contracts or grants or whatever to do some work. But there may be people willing to come back. But that's the real question. Is anybody going to want to work for the federal government when you can have the whole premises, which was you were doing a public good, you weren't making as much money as you could in the private sector, you had good benefits, and but the idea was that you were serving the public good and that this mattered, and that this administration doesn't honor that. And speaking as a political scientist, personally, there's a lot of rebuilding, restructuring of our system that's needed. But I do think there are probably pockets of people who who would like to come back. Maybe not full-time, maybe not in a management position. You know, senior people say you took one of the buyouts, but maybe come back in some kind of position that would involve building up the staff. Have you heard of, I have not actually heard of sort of concrete ideas.
Right. I'll just say briefly, Chris, I think you described it well. Some of the things we're seeing there's some things maybe with hopefully short-term impact that hopefully can be addressed, but I think a lot of what we're seeing is you described well. Cancellation of certain products that need, and the process to reestablish them, staffing. There aren't quick fixes, and I know the ASA advocates for the statistical agencies to have the staff and the resources to do their work well, but it's ultimately the administration that has a lot of control over the level of hiring. It's a challenging thing that I know the project is continuing to monitor.
So if anybody has ideas,
Yeah.
Well, I don't have an idea, this is probably more piling on, but when you said
Yeah.
pipeline, I was actually
Yeah.
thinking like young folks in
I was
college
thinking young folks.
who are
Yes.
thinking about a career,
Yes,
like, but there's not, it's not.
it's
There's
not.
nothing there, and they're
Yeah.
going
Right.
to tech companies if they're taking a data center
Yeah.
job anyways, and how is the government ever gonna attract
Well, I
people
think
versus
part
that?
of it may be that the government may have to think in more short, if we can get some of the brightest students and say, we know you want to do other things and you may not want, but would you give us 3 or 4 years before you get your next degree or go to your tech job or something? You could get a lot of, I think, energy and so on. There are also, of course, basic reforms that predate this administration, which is the federal hiring process, which I have not personally been through in decades, but I understand this is not very functional, and one would hope that would be spiffed up. But so, and that's what I was saying about some of the retirees might be willing to come back to sort of honcho such things, to work with recruitment and perhaps some different hiring expectations for
I know
people.
Zennials, they love older people coming in and telling them how to do this.
No.
It's
It
gotta
would
be all
have to
hands
be,
on
it's
deck,
gotta
yeah.
be all hands on deck. It's
Yeah.
gotta be, you can serve your
Yeah,
country,
absolutely.
and we know you're not going to probably want to hang around, although some people will, as opposed to, yeah, we want you for 20, 30 years doing this same process in the national accounts that you've always done. That doesn't cut it. That's
So
for
to
sure.
that end, and again, I think the work that the space had done in the last year for data archiving was remarkable and special. But it does feel like there is increasingly clear now, not just the problem of the data sets themselves, but that expertise.
Yes, yes.
And has the ASA or any of these other organizations thought about creating some sort of history of these individuals who filled these spots and like done something like NPR had the StoryCorps series
Yeah.
where they had like long form oral interviews with people.
Yeah,
Like something like that to talk to all of these folks who are
now,
no longer in the government but have 40 years of experience in these agencies. Because like I
that's a
think there might,
great idea.
because at best case we're 3 years away from anything being
That's right.
instituted.
That's
Best
right.
case, and that's unlikely.
And it's not gonna
probably
happen
further out.
instantly,
Exactly.
even if it.
That is a great idea. There is one organization, and I can't keep some of them straight, that are doing stories of data use by folks out like in
American
this
Data.
word cloud, but of essentially doing
Like essentially creating
oral
like an
interviews of,
archive of expertise for the next
Yes.
people who come in to be able to tap into,
Interesting.
to learn, because like you can't replace that
right.
40, 50 years of experience.
Right.
But if you can at least capture a piece of it.
And if you
continuity
could
of
do that for documentation, I'm a big documentation fan. Everybody hates documentation to do it, that's, but,
That is where AI might be helpful.
yes, and I know, you're
Yeah.
absolutely right. It absolutely would be. AI could be helpful. For instance, BEA has been gradually developing, it's a handbook of the national accounts, but they have chapters, there's some chapters on some very fine points, and there are other topics that are just totally missing so far because they haven't been able to get to them. I could see that could be a very useful thing for somebody to fund some of these folks who retired to, do that, and encapsulating expertise. Those are excellent ideas.
I have a question.
Yes.
Switching the topic, I'm really interested in the public perception and the trust in federal statistics. And I know this is a big topic, not just for this report, because I guess personally, I feel like a lot of these changes, there does need to be some kind of public investment in it, you know, whether we're talking about voting or whatever.
Yes.
So I was curious if there is any kind of a target or a benchline, like either like something that, if it's this percent, then we're in good shape, you know, something to strive for, or even like compared to other countries, you know, that are also relying as much, you know, they have their own federal statistical systems, usually more centralized than ours, but anyway, like do you have any sense of that at all? Like some of those numbers did, especially among the data users, look good, but it's like, where do we want them to be?
One possible source of data for comparison is that you can look at estimates about confidence in different institutions, and some of those series are available over time. And we've looked a little bit at the Census Household Pulse Survey, and they ask questions on confidence in different American institutions, the Census Bureau, statistical agencies. There's some analysis in the July report, which is called Nation's Data at a Crossroads. So other government institutions and some non-government or non-federal government institutions like public schools or the police or military is a federal government institution. Federal statistical agencies are not at the top of that group in confidence. If I remember correctly, military was probably the highest, but at that time, confounded with, I missed them.
Recognition, like are people even thinking about, everybody knows.
People know the Census Bureau, statistical agencies are probably different level of recognition. So I think there is some history of these confidence series. Household Pulse Survey goes back a few years. I think there are data collected from different sources. It's a little bit hard to get at trust in federal statistics over time. There's select surveys that have asked it here and there. Not all have published their estimates. So that's interesting also to look at international comparisons and trust in federal data.
Yeah, the Pulse Survey is interesting because they changed the design. If you followed, it's now a longitudinal panel or something. And they changed it just when people were leaving. And apparently some of the people who were ready to look at that. So between last April, was it, publishing for February, and just now, they didn't publish anything from it. And they just now came out with April 2025, is that right? And Zach is, people are looking at that. But there, you know, Congress, the president, the Supreme Court are all in the, you know, way down here. Public schools are pretty good. The military at that time, again, this is the latest is April 2025 is what their latest out. And federal statistics are not bad. They're not where, if you're in the statistical system, you think they should be, you know, but they're up there. But again, they have only published through April 2025. So
correct.
Again, partly because, and they're no longer also publishing tables or announcements about it. You get a comma delimited file or a SAS file, and you have to keep looking for it. It's an example of how they've had to sacrifice things that make it easy for users.
It's both a story of valuable data to look at some of these questions and an example of federal data that have been impacted by
all
some of the recent changes.
right, well, we are just about at time. I just want to check one more time if there's anybody online that has any pressing comments or questions for Connie and Zach.
Again, email Steve. I gave you that. But you can ask Steve that you'd like to talk to one of us, since we didn't put our emails there. And we're really quite happy to talk about all this. But the focus on the staff, including, good contractor staff is absolutely key in how we get that back.
Well, thank you
Thank
very
you.
much, both of you. Thank you for coming in person today and participating in the series. And to everyone who came in person is online, who's participating. I just have to do a brief plug for some upcoming DC-AAPOR events, including later this month, our POQ special issue panel on qualitative research. And next month, STAYPOR, for those who will be in town while our colleagues are attending APOR in LA. Thank you, everyone, and have a great afternoon.
All right.
I had a former survey panelist in our panel for business, and they dropped out because no
Okay.
one wants to take surveys.